Welcome, everyone. I am Layla Ghoshi with Ballady Magazine. I'm the editor of Ballady Magazine, and I am so pleased to welcome today Dr. Jörg Matthias Determann and Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik. I would like to read their bios quickly. Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik is a lecturer in science and religion at the University of Edinburgh with a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Nottingham and another in theology from the University of St. Mary's, Twickenham. Shoaib stands at the crossroads of science and religion. His monograph work, Islam and Evolution, Al-Ghazālī and the Modern Evolutionary Paradigm, was acclaimed as the foremost academic contribution to the field and science of religion, receiving recognition from the International Society for Science and Religion, ISSR, in 2022. He holds the position of trustee at the ISSR and serves on the editorial board of Theology and Science. Shoaib also assumes the role of chief editor for Palgrave's newly launched Islam and Science book series and encyclopedia, further enriching scholarly discourse at this interdisciplinary crossroads. Dr. Jörg Matthias Determann is professor of history at Virginia Commonwealth University, Qatar. He is the author of 4 books published by IB Tauris, Islam, Science Fiction, and Extraterrestrial Life in 2020, Space Science in the Arab World in 2018, Researching Biology and Evolution in the Gulf States, 2015, and Historiography in Saudi Arabia. Today we are here to discuss their new book. They are co-editors of this collection, and the book is titled Islamic Theology and Extraterrestrial Life, New Frontiers in Science and Religion. I wanted to say, first of all, welcome. Welcome to Ballady Magazine.
Thank you so much for inviting us. Thank you for having us.
Sure. I wanted to say just a few words on my own about this book first. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of depth out of it. And since I had been at the conference that I think this, was a precursor to this book, I recognized some, of course, the speakers who were the writers in this book now. I recognized similar themes, but it was very helpful to get more of that depth out of their original meaning. I actually wanted to share a little bit of background on the conference, if you don't mind. I'm going to pull that up on the screen for us. Let me come back to it. Here we are. Now, this is now on academia.edu, but way back in 2022, it's been 2 years already. When I heard we're holding this conference, I was very thrilled to be involved, even though I think I was up at 2 or 3 a.m. to make sure I was there. But I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit about first what brought you to bring the conference together, and what was the response of participants in the conference?
Right. Thank you once again, Layla, for inviting the two of us on your platform. Both of us are very honored and very delighted to be here. So to answer your question, we came in from different contexts, and the prompt for me for this was, I think, different to Matthias. Matthias has already been working in this area, prior to myself, What sparked the curiosity in me was social media, believe it or not. The book that you mentioned in my blurb, Islam and Evolution, was the first real monograph that I published, and that led to a lot of interesting conversations online, right? And I posited the idea that perhaps there could be other human-like entities at the time of Adam. And there was a conversation on Facebook where somebody mentioned, if that was the case, it should have been mentioned in the Quran, right? It would have been so important that the Quran should have mentioned it. As that conversation progressed, we got onto the topic of aliens. I gave them the counterexample. Well, many Muslim scholars say that if aliens were to exist, it would not contradict anything to do with Islamic scripture. And again, the same reasoning was brought forward. If aliens did exist, it would have been mentioned in the Quran. So that became, for me, a stimulus to look into this a little bit more carefully, with more in depth. And I wanted to, invite as many different people as I could to participate in this conversation. So I approached Matthias after having shortly interviewed him on his book, the one that he just put up there. And during that conversation, Matthias and I just clicked instantaneously. Like Matthias, I really enjoyed working with Matthias. We were like, acid and base. We react so well, right? And he liked the idea of having a conference. We decided to house it under Virginia Commonwealth University, under the auspices of the Qatari branch, and it was just fireworks after that. I mean, people were very excited. Yourself, we got several people on board, and that's what led to the formation of this book. So that's my background. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much again, Leila, for giving us this opportunity and for being part of this journey over the last few years since we held this conference. And thank you for supporting this conference. Thank you also for reminding us of our beautiful booklet that Shoaib designed at the time. I've been interested in questions of alien life since my childhood. I've been a big science fiction fan, growing up as a child already as a fan of Star Trek as well as Star Wars and many others. I've been interested in Islamic science fiction and broadly futurism among Muslim societies, especially since I started living in Qatar since 2013, when I have been surrounded by a lot of futuristic architecture, and since I've been teaching at Virginia Commonwealth University's Qatar campus, where a lot of my students are interested in Muslim worlds, Muslim futurisms, game design as well, fantastic graphical worlds, world building more broadly. The conference itself was organized in 2022, which was at the time when still the world was just about to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which itself seemed very science fiction-esque at the time. The COVID pandemic obviously did a lot of terrible things to human populations, created a lot of death and suffering, but it also made us very used to and accepting of online conferences like this one that we organized. And one of the wonderful things about online conferences is that it really connects people everywhere with an internet connection. And unfortunately, people in the Muslim world are often divided from one another, as well as from people elsewhere, by restrictive visa regimes. So depending on the country that you're in, depending on the passport that you have, you might find it difficult to travel to in-person conferences elsewhere. Whereas with this online community, with this online conference, we could really build a community, and we've tried to build on that with our edited volume. This edited volume was created through a purely online collaboration. I think Shoaib and I met once in person in Dubai, but otherwise we've been I was just working on this via email, via Google Docs. But we are very, very grateful to the technologies that made this book possible.
Yes, and I'm going to pull that book up on the screen. I think I have that as well here, of course. Something I wanted to bring up before we move forward, when I spoke about that conference and some things I've described since, there are questions about terminology, such as what is the difference between exotheology, astrobiology. Those are probably the two main ones. And does astrobiology mean intelligent life, or does it mean any life? So would you like to comment on that, just to help us get a sense of that?
Yeah, I'll take the first one, which is the whole discussion about exotheology. So I would say the father of this field of looking at how extraterrestrial life can impact theological discussions is none other than the Lutheran professor Ted Peters. He's written a lot on this, and he actually endorsed the book, for which I'm very, very happy and grateful for. He was very kind enough to do that for us. He's actually also on the editorial board for the Journal of Theology and Science. So he's very eager to get his hands on a copy. He defines exotheology or astrotheology as any kind of discourse that revolves around how, if there is extraterrestrial life, how might it impact religious folks on the ground, right? And this can be both social, it can be from a variety of perspectives, be it socially, ethically, theologically, right? Because, religious communities aren't just theologically oriented. They've got a whole other host of factors around them. But that's the broad umbrella that he's espoused, that he's developed through his works. And we just borrowed that term. Right now, I think the field is still too young to kind of differentiate, astrotheology from exotheology. I think both of them are still pretty synonymous at this point in time, but that's what we mean by, exotheology. Matthias, you want to take over on astrobiology?
Yeah, so there are these terms that sort of seem to mirror one another. There's exotheology and astrotheology, and then there's exobiology and astrobiology. The word exo, the syllable exo, sort of suggests sort of outside, right? Sort of outside of Earth, right? That's also the meaning of extraterrestrial, outside of Earth. Whereas astro just means stars in general. Exobiology, as it was at least originally conceived, dealt with life outside of Earth, whereas astrobiology would deal with life in the universe more generally, so life on Earth as well as elsewhere. And I think one could also look at exotheology and astrotheology in the same way, that exotheology would deal with life outside of Earth, whereas astrotheology would deal with life in the universe more generally, outside of Earth as well as elsewhere on Earth. I think a lot of people nowadays prefer astrobiology over exobiology and astrotheology over exotheology, also because a lot of people would like to see us, human life, earthly life, in connection, in conversation with possible life elsewhere in the universe. Astrobiology does not necessarily deal with intelligent life. Astrobiology could mean sort of anything from single cell organisms, from bacteria to more complex multicellular organisms, to creatures as advanced as humans and more advanced. Obviously, there is a lot of popular interest, especially in the idea of extraterrestrial civilizations. That's what people would be excited more about than just the presence of bacteria elsewhere. Similarly, I think astrotheologians are most intrigued by questions of intelligent life. What if we find life that we are able to communicate with on a very advanced level? What if we could find creatures very similar to us or superior to us, maybe even creatures that we could attribute a soul to? I think these are questions that astrotheologians are especially excited about, intelligent life.
That is fascinating, actually. That discussion itself is fascinating because it seems that it, in some ways it's situational. If we're talking about, well, here's another question. Say that we may have a place on the, we may establish a base on the moon where people live. So in that case, even apart from whether life is in the universe or not, we would still how would the perception of theology and exotheology change, or would there be an impact even from the place of humans living off Earth? Would you say that there's some, I don't know, specifications that would change because of that, or would need to be thought of because of that? Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. So I think if I understood you correctly, you're asking what are the implications if humans were able to leave Earth and settle elsewhere? Is that the question? Yeah.
Right.
So if that's the case, then I think the most immediate question that comes to my mind for Muslims will be, which way is Mecca? So if you're going on another planet, or if you're going to another celestial body, right? Which way is Mecca? I think because 5 times you've got to pray every day. So I think that'd be the most immediate ethical question. I have a feeling you will have questions to do with interstellar Hajj, right? Because if you can imagine these advanced travels where we can go from one planet to another, I think even the dimension of Hajj, where you do this pilgrimage to Mecca, will have a whole new meaning for a lot of people's minds. I'm trying to think if this has any implications, like on a creedal level. If you think about the concept of the end of days, right, Judgment Day, all the Abrahamic religions have this notion that there are signs that lead up towards this eschatological event. And some people could argue, given the descriptions that we have, it does not seem likely that we're going to have interstellar travel. Perhaps some may make that argument that these scriptural records are too clear. They're very earthly in order for them to accept or entertain these ideas. Other people could, I believe, counter that by saying, hang on, it doesn't necessarily specify that these events necessarily have to take place here. Maybe some of them might, but perhaps this could be, a galactic event. So I do feel the discussion of the end of days, eschatology might be impacted. What at least that's from the Islamic side. I don't know what else I could say in terms of theological discourse, how it might happen, but those two are the immediate ones that come to mind. Matthias, what do you think?
Thank you so much. I think you made a very useful division here into sort of rituals and then creed on the other hand. The rituals are, as we have them in the Islamic religion, very earthbound, right? Sort of, it has to do with praying in the direction of Mecca. It has to do with fasting based on sunrise and sunset, based on also like a lunar calendar that basically is about where Earth is, where the moon is, where the sun is. Now, the Islamic community has already experienced challenges when it comes to sunrise and sunset by expanding to northern latitudes, for instance, right? So if you live near the polar region, and so very, very close to the polar regions, but you might have very, very long days or very, very short days, depending on the time of the year. Sort of making the traditional fasting during Ramadan challenging if you just followed the same ritual guidelines as were developed for latitudes closer to Mecca. This has not proven to be an insurmountable challenge. In fact, we have Muslim communities almost everywhere on our planet, including in northern countries like Norway or northern Canada and so on. Similarly, right, we have had Muslims visiting the International Space Station that goes very, very fast around Earth with, again, like sunsets, sunrises, appearing much, much faster than on Earth. Islam has successfully mastered these kinds of challenges. It is very likely that Islam will be able to remain flexible enough to basically allow for rituals to be done differently in outer space on other celestial bodies. In terms of like interstellar colonization, it is an interesting question. The Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of resurrection, the day of judgment, that is obviously a question about which we don't have any certainties, right? Only God really knows what will happen. If we look at the very, very long term, we do have interesting questions, right? So if humans spread around the solar system, if we spread to other star systems, right? If we send generation ships elsewhere, could it mean that at some point our species might divide? That that life, from Earth might evolve in different ways, right? Where we might even have certain populations of humans adapting to one kind of planet, other humans maybe adapting to a different planet, to a different planetary system altogether, which might then also raise questions about human nature. And any questions relating to human nature, what is human nature, especially if we have different kinds of human natures in the plural in different parts of the cosmos, would be interesting from a theological perspective too.
Yeah, after I finished this book, that had just popped in my head. What if we are the life that's extraterrestrial? What would we be doing? But I want to come back and actually look at some of the contents of the book, just to give viewers a sense of what it's about, and then maybe talk about just a few sections that I thought were really fascinating. And so first, I think it would be great. I wanted to pull up the table of contents and just acknowledge all of these wonderful writers. And I wonder if you'd like to say a few things about each of the writers, and maybe which ones, have brought out certain perspectives. And in fact, I also do have another section. I'm scrolling now, because what I really liked was that you also put the articles in categories, or you help the reader understand the categories by discussing which ones might fall more under theology and scripture, or jurisprudence, or Islam and Christianity, or society, which I also think is a very important topic. So I wonder if one or both of you would like to maybe discuss some main points from these writers, and then there's some sections I'd like to ask you about as well.
Yeah, sure. So when we had the contributors come in for the conference, one of the things that we always worry about when it comes to the proceedings of the conference, be it a special issue in an article in a journal or an edited volume, is how do we map these out? And since the entire focus was to do with theology is a very broad word, it's an umbrella word, and within there you have several divisions. So what we wanted to do was provide some kind of a map that can help people understand where these different authors are coming in from. Now, just a general word about who the authors are, the contributors. So we were very lucky. We got very hardworking, quality people that were able to participate in this. So, for example, the first chapter is written by a sheikh. So a sheikh within the Islamic tradition, somebody who's gone down, seminary programs, has, done years upon years of Arabic, gone through, the nitty-gritties of the textual resources. So we were very, very happy to have Sheikh Hamza on, right? Others are a combination. They're academics as well as, from seminary backgrounds. For instance, Muammar, he just finished his PhD at the University of Cardiff. And interestingly, the book is dedicated to his daughter, who was born on the day of the conference. So me and Matthias decided it'd be very sweet if we could just dedicate this book to her. So if you go at the very top, the very first page is dedicated to da-da-da-da. That's the name of his daughter. So we had a good community around us. We were very lucky about that. So this is where I think Matthias's and my expertise kind of kicked in really well. I was not so, conversant with some of the wider societal impact. And given Matthias's preceding work, I mean, it just was a natural fit to see how we can move away just from pure theological conversations, either to do with scripture or jurisprudence, which is the first half of the book, to maybe seeing how it could interact with the rest of the people out there, be it within Muslim societies or with other religions. And that's how we were able to kind of neatly divide this up into, the different parts. So that's kind of like the macro lens. I'll let Matthias, walk you over the different titles of the chapter.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, I don't necessarily want to bore readers with just going through the table of contents, which is probably something that they can do on their own. But what I wanted to say is I'm just very proud of the diversity of our authors that we've been able to get. Diversity in terms of geographical locations, from people based in the Muslim world as well as outside of the Muslim world, people who are Muslims as well as Christians, people who represent different disciplines as well. So the natural sciences, the social sciences, philosophy, history, literature, and sometimes indeed in the very same person. So Shoaib, for instance, here I would describe you as a natural scientist, of course, but also as a theologian and as a philosopher too. And because of this diversity, we then also came up with different perspectives, and that, of course, was also one of the words in the title of the original conference, right? Islamic perspectives on exotheology. So we're not offering one particular perspective that is Islamic. Instead, we're offering a plurality of perspective. The topic is extremely rich. The topic has great potential, right? The life in the universe, there's probably hardly a topic that's bigger than that potentially, right? As big as the cosmos itself. And of course, Islam is incredibly broad and rich and multifaceted in its traditions as well. And that's part of the success of Islam, right? That Islam has been able to adapt to different environments, that Islam exists in different climate zones here on Earth, in different countries, different national cultures, and so on. And as Islam spreads perhaps throughout the cosmos, right, that diversity will only be retained. But like I said, people are free to sort of go through the contents, the table of contents themselves. What I would like to say is that all of them are essentially just starting points of the conversation, right? We have only like barely scratched on the surface of this topic, right? We as humanity still do not have conclusive evidence that there is in fact life outside of Earth, right? If we do discover it, right, we would probably be at the beginning of a great journey of discovery for all of humanity, and a great journey of discovery for scientists as well as for theologians. And I think everybody should have a voice in that. I personally hope that we will have maybe a greater diversity in some other respects in the future. So we're obviously very grateful to you, Leila, for your interest. But otherwise, for instance, I wish we had more contribution from women, for instance, from Muslim female theologians in particular. If there are any Muslim female theologians in particular listening to our conversations, please get in touch, and we would love to work with you as well, and just have our conversation as inclusive as possible of thinkers of all different identities, including gender identities.
That is a wonderful point that you make, because you're reminding me of your introduction where you described a female scientist, and in fact, I'm losing her name now, but she had some fascinating things to say. I think she is an astrobiologist, am I correct? And seemed to be very much thinking forward, I guess, as to not only about her subject, but about women in science, but then also as a woman, as a Muslim woman in her field. I just enjoyed reading that about her. And I wonder, how you came to recognize her work, and can you tell me a little more about her, actually?
Leila, I think Matthias might be able to inform you better, because he actually reached out to quite a few people, so I'll let him take that. But I just wanted to say there are people who are messaging me behind the scenes saying they can't chat. The chat seems to be disabled. I don't know what technical issue there is, but no one can type anything on the chat.
Okay, thank you for telling me that.
No worries.
Matthias, while you are mentioning that, I'll see why that's not working, because it's always worked before, as they say. So,
No worries. While Leila is trying to have a look at YouTube here and maybe the technical settings, I would like to acknowledge that yes, we have had a number of Muslim astronomers and scientists featured in the introduction, so not just one. We had Noor Scarf, who is a French scientist of Lebanese origin. We had Munazza Alam, who is an American scientist of South Asian background who identifies with the Ahmadiyya community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And then we had another female scientist called Burçin Mutlu Pakdil, who has her own galaxy named after herself, Burçin's galaxy, that people can look up. At least 3 female Muslim scientists who thought about life in the universe as well. I mentioned in the introduction. I am very, very proud that we have so many leading Muslim scientists in many, many different fields, including astronomy and astrophysics. I acknowledge, of course, that there are these sort of stereotypes that sometimes exist of Muslim women being repressed, Muslim women being subject to patriarchy. And I obviously am aware that patriarchy exists and unfortunately exists everywhere. But I also am aware that Muslim women have made great advances in terms of education, that here in Qatar, where I'm based, Qatari girls and Qatari young women are outperforming Qatari boys and Qatari young men, often when it comes to educational achievements and standardized tests. Also in other Muslim countries, you have, for instance, in Turkey, often a higher proportion of women professors than you do have in some European countries, including Nordic countries that are sometimes held up in terms of being examples of gender equality. So all of this is just to say that we have this enormous female brain power in the Muslim world, some of which has been tapped already, but a lot of it still is sort of emerging, has not been fully tapped. So even if this conference now and the conference volume has been dominated by male presenters and male authors, I'm very, very optimistic that we will have many, many more female voices contributing to our conversations.
Yeah, that I find, just very fascinating. And so thank you for including that. So I'm still working on the chat. I can see what is happening.
Leila, while you work on that, can I add something to what Matthias said?
Sure.
That's okay. Yeah. So as somebody who's actively working in the field of Islam and science, which includes more conversations than just extraterrestrials and their impact on Islam, we have many other conversations, right? Evolution, AI seems to be the most recent one. And personally, part of my objective is to help train other people to get involved in this conversation. And so there are many different avenues through which I'm doing this through. One, for example, is by working with seminaries who are interested in having these new conversation points, right? How do you kind of bring the tradition that has been extensively developed for the past 1400 years and link it to contemporary concerns, be it, in AI, extraterrestrials, quantum physics, whatever have you. So that's one thing, to work with seminaries. Another thing is that as you mentioned in the introduction, so I've been recently appointed at the University of Edinburgh, and in the field of science and religion, there are like 3 top centers for this particular field, science and religion. That is the Faraday Institute, that is loosely affiliated with the University of Cambridge. That is the Ian Ramsay Center, which is affiliated with the University of Oxford, and that's the School of Divinity, which is affiliated with the University of Edinburgh. So I was recently hired by the third one, and as far as I can tell, this is the first time any of these top 3 centers have hired a Muslim and a Muslim who has expertise in Islam and science. So that will open up a bunch of new channels through which we can hopefully, generate and train a whole cohort of scholars who want to get in this field. So University of Edinburgh offers, MSc programs. It even offers a PhD program in science and religion. Many people don't know that, but you can actually do a master's level degree and a PhD in science and religion. I mean, I wish I had this when I was younger, but it just, started in the past few years. So I'm very excited about the future, and just echoing off of what Matthias, that this is, I think, an amazing time for people who have a vested interest in how you can relate two big bodies, right? You've got the Islamic corpus, you've got these scientific things. How do you kind of make meaningful interactions? And so I'm very excited about this space, and I hope that other people can participate in the conversation through these conferences, through these education streams, and I hope that in the next 10, 20 years we can see more and more people developing these avenues into further, much more grained developments.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I wanted to move on to another part of the book. I am still working on the chat situation. So I wonder if we'd like to cover a couple more things, and then maybe I'll have a chance to, open the chat if that works. Yeah, or, why don't we stop right now and just figure out the chat? I'm flexible. Does anybody have any problems with that?
I'm flexible with whatever. It works both ways for me. I mean,
yeah. Ever since COVID, live, streaming is just, it is what it is. So I'm going to take a quick look at the channel.
Yeah, I should also mention perhaps to our listeners that even if you have trouble putting your comments directly into YouTube, I think all three of us are on Twitter as well, so feel free to tweet to us.
That's a great idea.
We are also on Facebook, so you can sort of put your questions as comments in the Facebook posts as well. And this video that you're watching right now on YouTube, this will stay up as well. So even if we're not able to figure out the live commenting function right now, hopefully we'll be able to enable comments to be added afterwards. Like I said earlier as well, this conference, this book is really only just the beginning of a conversation. So get your questions to us in whatever form, in whatever way, and we might not have answers for you immediately anyway, because this topic is so big and your questions might be very big, but we would love to work with you on getting closer to some answers.
Yeah, and in regard to YouTube, I think what's happening is since we're live now, it's not allowing me to access the chat. I can see where to access it, but where to access the enabler, but it's not doing that for some reason. And I've never had that happen before. So this is a strange technological morning. But I did want to move forward, and some ideas came to mind as I was reading the book, which is, in terms of, like we said earlier, finding an amoeba versus finding extraterrestrial life. And a lot of people are more interested, in the extraterrestrial life. But do you think the excitability impact might be different? But would finding microscopic life still impact our theology, especially Islamic theology? How do you think it would impact that?
So I think that for a lot of religious folks, if there were, some kind of living organisms that are single cellular organisms, very, very simple things, right? Like bacteria or viruses. I think that would be a cool discovery in of itself, but I'm not sure whether it will be transformative in the theological space, just because I think that the key question that is running through everyone's minds is, are there equivalent intellectual beings on other planets, yay or nay, right? Because the existential ontology, at least in the Islamic sphere, is you've got jinn, which are like, you can translate them as demons if you want to. You've got angels, and you've got humans. These are generally known as the rational species, so to speak.
Yeah.
But is there anything out other than these? That's the key question. Are there other things? Because then it entails all kinds of conversations down the line. If they are, of intellect, does that mean they have a spiritual component to them as well? Because that's also another conversation, right? Do non-humans have souls? Right? That's a big conversation. And depending on how we understand extraterrestrials, whether they have intellect or not, whether they can even have revelation or not. I mean, that's a very, very difficult question to absorb. So I was actually speaking to a few friends of mine. So I asked them if Christianity was revealed to them on other planets, does that mean they had another Council of Nicaea, in the universe somewhere else? And then would there be a competition whose Council of Nicaea was earlier, therefore you're more authentic? So all kinds of, counterfactual questions, or hypothetical questions rather. So for me, I think that if there was, non-intellectual life out there, I think that'd be a cool discovery in of itself. It goes to show that there are perhaps life permitting circumstances where we can actually see that rather than just merely speculating about it. But what I think people are really curious about, particularly more so now with UFOs kind of really hovering on everyone's minds, is whether they have consciousness, whether they have intellect. And I think that's where the real buzz is, at least as far as I can tell. Matthias, what do you think?
Thank you. These are all very, very good points, very interesting points. I would like to mention, though, that obviously even the discovery of very simple forms of life would raise questions about the origin of life, right? Would life originate from a single point in the universe? Would it spread out from there, or would it have been emerged sort of in parallel or independently from one another on different celestial objects? I should also say that yes, if we find intelligent, advanced creatures, this raises special theological questions. But I think any kind of life already raises ethical questions. And of course, theology has a very close relation with ethics as well. There's an entire field called Islamic bioethics that has recently received a boost from an international congress on bioethics that was just held in Doha, co-organized by Muhammad Ghali, one of the endorsers of our book. So I would like to thank him and give a shout out to him here as well. So bioethical questions, so the ethics dealing with life. So if we have microbes found on Mars or one of the oceans under the ice of Enceladus or Europa, the moons of Saturn and Jupiter respectively, we already have ethical questions how we should engage even with that microbial life. On a very basic level, it would mean, well, should we go to these planets and potentially disturb the local biosphere, right? If we send our own spacecraft there, could we accidentally bring our own viruses, bacteria to this planet, to this moon, and then wreak havoc on the local ecosystem, right? Could we even risk that? Should we stay away from these planets altogether so that we don't destroy potentially whatever life forms, even the lower life forms there might be? Or conversely, if we do end up going there, as we have, right? If we send spacecraft to Mars, send rovers to Mars, as we have, should we send return samples back to Earth, right? The COVID pandemic that we've lived through, obviously, has reminded us of the danger of alien pathogens here on Earth, right? So if there's even a small risk that we might bring a virus back from Mars to us, a very resilient and highly resistant virus, right? A virus that that could survive the journey through space from Mars back to Earth. Could such a virus potentially spread a new pandemic, a Martian pandemic here on Earth, something that science fiction authors have already discussed, for instance, in Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain. So we do have these bioethical questions that already come up, even if we're just dealing with microbes from another planet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I mentioned that because I've noticed every so often, NASA will say they have an announcement, and then there'll be all this speculation of, oh, did they finally find, an amoeba or whatever. And so the rollout always seems to be very careful, even though we haven't had the big announcement yet, but that's probably wise. I mean, any institution wants to manage how they deliver information. But that just gave me the sense that it would, it probably would create a lot of discussion. So that's interesting. The other aspect of that, I think, is, as you were mentioning, Matthias, that, the concerns of either us contaminating the planet or them, the planet, us bringing something back, that speaks to that sociological side of it's as if, fiction and online discussions are like helping us prepare ourselves or helping us teach ourselves. Would you see that have you noticed those types of messages within just popular culture or just online conversations? What do you think?
Is this for Matthias or for me first?
I guess, Shoaib, you can go first, actually.
Right. So there's a quote that's attributed to Winston Churchill, which I've not been able to track down. But in effect, that quote says that if we were to make the existence of extraterrestrials, positively affirmed in the minds of many, it could destroy religion. And I think this is where this expectation might come in, right? Because even in my conversations, I believe that theologically that space is there. There's no denying that, right? Scripturally, there's nothing problematic there. But I think that people may have taken particular positions either because of groupthink or just because of how they may feel about Scripture, that there is nothing special out there. Human beings are the only special ones. And I think psychologically and sociologically, if we do encounter a very mighty race, right? We're talking about entities, if they do make contact with us, that means they've mastered interstellar travel, potentially. That means they have more sophisticated gadgets than us, right? Perhaps maybe even more spiritually enlightened than us. We don't know, perhaps. That, I think, can really existentially challenge a few people. And one of the concerns that I had was like, if this were to happen, what theological resources could we draw upon to show that this isn't problematic, and kind of easing that existential crisis if it were to occur, right? And that's why we drew on all these resources. We even have, I don't know if you remember, but David's chapter and Faisal's chapter was all about how even within classical books, they discussed the potency of there being intellects beyond human categories and how we would treat them from a religious standpoint. This was several hundred years ago. So if we have those tools and resources, we should hopefully not be able to go through that existential shock. But I can see the potency in this attributed quote to Winston Churchill. I'm saying attributed because I haven't found the source as of yet. So that's my take. That's my take.
Thank you. Great point as well. I mentioned earlier science fiction as well, and science fiction has been this wonderful genre that has allowed us to think broadly and boldly through various kinds of implications of science and technology, including the discovery or contact with alien life. A lot of science fiction that deals with alien life has to do with the topic of colonialism or imperialism. So we have a lot of science fiction about galactic empires, right? So the empire of, for instance, the Klingons or the Romulans in Star Trek, or the Galactic Empire in Star Wars. Science fiction also often works with these topics of colonization. So it's either us colonizing space, colonizing the solar system, colonizing the Milky Way galaxy. So us going to other planets and setting up space colonies and planetary colonies, or it's about the aliens coming to us and invading us and colonizing us and trying to extract our resources. Now, this has been themes of global science fiction. Mm-hmm. I think Islamic science fiction, Muslim science fiction is especially interesting when it comes to like working through these topics of colonization, in part because the Muslim world has experienced both the expansion and building of its own empires, as well as the experience of being colonized themselves, right? So in Islamic history, we've seen the establishment of big Arab and Muslim empires, famously the Abbasid Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, the Mughal Empire, like all big Muslim empires. And then, of course, in the 19th century and 20th century, most Muslim lands were themselves then colonized by European empires, notably the British and the French Empire. So Muslims, through their own history, have been able to engage with these topics of empire and colonialism as sort of being part of, let's say, the Ottoman or Mughal Empire, but then also being victim of an empire. So there is a lot of like resources in Islamic history, Islamic literature about thinking through empire, thinking through colonization. So yeah, I would see Islamic literature, Muslim literature as a great resource for how to engage with a powerful, potentially colonial other.
Yeah, and that's something that does fascinate me about Islamic science fiction and speculative fiction because of that. And I even think today, I think the discussions we're having now can help people, sort of pull that into their consciousness and think about it. Because what I also thought of when you said Star Trek was, about landing on other planets and potentially impacting their environments. There was the Prime Directive where Captain Kirk always said, we're not supposed to meddle in the other planet, and then they always end up doing it anyway. So maybe we need a different approach than the Prime Directive. So I did have a question someone asked me. And she said, I'm on the live. I've always had a question. Is what we always think of as ET is maybe jinn? Because nothing in the Quran states that they are on Earth exclusively. So that's a good question. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah.
Right. So we actually make it a point here to qualify our inquiry. So jinn, right, is a broad category, and jinn may very well be extraterrestrials. I don't think neither myself nor Matthias denies that possibility. But the way we've qualified the discussion of extraterrestrials is not necessarily that they're jinn, but these are biological entities that, are on other planets. So that may be jinn, that may not be jinn. That question is wide open. So in other words, the inquiry is, so you have angels, jinns, and human beings. Can there be another class of species that occupy, intellect, that occupy morality, spirituality, all those things? That's the point of inquiry. So we just wanted to qualify that in the very beginning, because that's a question that came up almost every time I introduced this book to a circle. It's like, oh, are you talking about jinns? Like, guys, we're not talking about jinns in this book. This is specifically this. But, I would love for people to kind of make a case, like I do see online. I do see some people on Twitter making a case, these things look like jinn, including one of my teachers. A sheikh who I studied from, he believes that the activities of what we, usually attribute to extraterrestrials seems almost jinn-like, which is interesting. But I'm not too quick to make that connection. They may be the same thing. They may not be the same thing. Matthias.
Yeah, the jinn are described as sort of creatures that have their own world, right? There are these Arabic notions of alam al-ins wa alam al-jinn, so the world of the humans and the world of the jinn. Obviously, the word world in Arabic, alam, is a very sort of broad word. It's a vague word if you want to use that description. It's not quite clear what is necessarily meant by world. One can maybe characterize the jinn in different ways. One could even describe them perhaps as extra-dimensional creatures, as creatures that might have their own parallel dimension, as creatures that might even obey different physical laws than ours. One could speculate. I think for theologians, they serve the purpose of being a very useful analog, right? So the Quran does not have a chapter about the aliens, but the Quran does have a chapter about the jinn. And they are seen as, in some ways, quite similar to humans in that they are created. So they're creatures. They are not gods. As powerful as they might be, they are not angels, and they will be judged as humans as well. So in that sense, the jinn can serve for the purpose of theological discussions as useful analogs about other advanced creatures who are not humans.
Can I add something to that, Layla? So
Sure.
there have been speculations that perhaps jinn may be bacteria, because since they're also unobservable to the naked eye, these are wild speculations, of course, but I've seen that. So coordinating jinn with entities is not necessarily with extraterrestrial stuff. It's also here terrestrial. So I've seen those kinds of discussions as well. That's why I said there's nothing like as a clear correspondence that these could be those, they could not be those. I think it's open game.
That is fascinating. Even that, a virus does impact us, and who's to say, their lives. So that's very fascinating. I did notice another question on here, but then I want to follow up more with scriptural information. Someone has asked, I know we are talking about Islam and extraterrestrial life, but even if someday there is viability of such topic, would Islam and atheism need to be a new discussion, since it's no longer really limited to sources from the Quran that much anymore? I'm not sure if I understand the question.
So I've asked him to clarify that question for me.
Okay.
I have a feeling from my assessment is does the discussion or the polemics between theists and atheists, Islam and atheism, does that get re-energized in an extraterrestrial context, right? Just like how evolution kind of kicked off a wave of thinking about how can you potentially square this off. could this maybe that? I've thought about this, and I think yes, I think it could. So have you guys seen the TV show, or the it's a very famous TV show, Ancient Aliens? Have you guys seen Ancient Aliens? There's
Not
a meme
yet.
of this guy with like the hair, and he's become a meme now. He's like one of the main guys in the show. And they attribute every like massive, significant historical finding to aliens. It's a straight aliens. Even Islam was no different to them. They use things like, for example, the we in the Quran. All that refers to aliens. So right. So I can see now. You can see now where I'm going to go with this. I can see criticisms coming off, or maybe points of engagement coming off of that. Perhaps prophets were aliens, right? And they, came down from these other planets. Though, I mean, as wildly speculative as that may be, I can see that conversation bubbling up. And I'm not saying to encourage these discussions. I mean, people are welcome to do so. But I'm saying that I can see how that could become a point of discussion in the realm of theology, right?
Right.
And I can even see it how it squares with Adam. Was Adam perhaps the first? He was because he's deemed a special creation in Islamic scripture and in the Bible, right? So could it be that he's special because he was brought from another planet to this planet, right? So I can see those things kind of kicking off. I'm not sure if that's exactly okay. That is what he meant. He just messaged me on WhatsApp. Yeah, so that is what he meant. So I think that's the real, I'd say, concerns in this atheism theism polemics where things can kick off. And I mean, I've thought a lot about this. I'm not ready to share my opinions yet, but those are just some initial thoughts for those of you who are wondering. Matthias, how about you, man?
It's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we will see if we discover alien life, right, how exactly theological debates will go. It will also depend on, for instance, whether advanced aliens might have a religion that is similar or different from ours as well. And whether we might be influenced by alien theologies in the future, just like, of course, religions here on earth have always borrowed from other religions too. So Islam itself, for instance, has borrowed stories, legends, ideas also from Christianity, from Judaism and other faiths. In general, in Islam, though, there is the idea of God being the Lord of the world in the plural, as the idea of God as being all-powerful, and that all of the wondrous creation that exists on earth and in the universe in general could be signs of God's omnipotence, right? And I mean, let's not forget how incredible life is here on earth, right? All the different life forms that we have here on planet, the life forms on land, in the water, deep under the sea, all the creatures from bacteria to mammals to fish to birds and so on. And Muslim scholars have written about all these fantastic creatures, as well as creatures of the imagination, right? There are fantastic books about imaginary animals as well in the Islamic tradition. And the encounter with all of these creatures who are so different from humans has never actually shaken Islamic theology. So if a Muslim gets close to a whale, for instance, he's generally not shaken in his belief. Or if a Muslim sees life at the bottom of the ocean near hydrothermal vents, I think the natural reaction of a believing Muslim would be, these are all the wonders of God's creation, and God is all powerful. So I would suspect if believing Muslims would see creatures in the universe, however different from they are, that the Muslims' reaction might actually be, mashallah, what God wants.
Yeah, and that's when Shoaib mentioned, I think both of you mentioned the chapter on the jinn and then the Lord of the Worlds. And I'm going to pull up another quote too, but it is very comforting to feel that there, anything you encounter is part of the natural world, that, whether it's a whale you've never seen before or who knows what, who knows what we'll see in the future. But it does give you kind of that sense of, okay, well, it is part of the world, not just something that I should be terrified by. Although, admittedly, I'd be terrified if I saw an alien, but that's another story. I wanted to bring up this one quote that I also enjoyed. That is in your book. And I bring it up just so that some viewers who may not be familiar with the Quran can just have some of the examples of the scripture. And this one, and this is from Muammar Khalalai's chapter. And it says, and livestock, he created them too. So it's a discussion of livestock. And then at the end, it says, they carry your loads to lands you yourselves could not reach without great hardship. Truly, your Lord is kind and merciful. Horses, mules, and donkeys for you to ride and use for show, and other things you know nothing about. And actually, this is a hadith, though, isn't it? Yes, but I find this theme to be very, open to the imaginary and open to, just feeling a sense of calm and peace when you encounter something new. So how has this been interpreted over time, Shoaib?
So to kind of relate to you. You said you'd feel peace if you saw someone, from another planet. I'd be terrified. I'd be petrified. So, I wouldn't know what to expect, So have you guys seen the movie Signs by Mel Gibson? This was a very, early. So that just, that petrifies me, that thought. Or War of the Worlds by Tom Cruise, right? You just don't know what you can expect. So, I personally, I think I'd be more on the side of caution than the side of, welcome to planet Earth. I don't think I'd be like, let's do peace. So, but that's just me personally. But this particular verse is very interesting because what Muhammad does in this, in the chapter of his, in this volume, is he goes through, I think it was 10, maybe 15, I forgot at the top of my head now, but he goes through some of the major exegetes' opinions on this particular verse. Including Al-Ghazālī, who's one of the greatest, exegetes that we have in our tradition. And Muhammad, I think he delineates 4 or 5 different opinions, including one which entertains the possibility of there being sentient life on, these other worlds, which is super phenomenal. And I think that openness in Scripture makes the speculations all the more exciting. Now, to be clear, right, none of these are creedal. None of these are like, you have to believe them, right? These are just open possibilities which God has not informed us about. These are min ilm al-ghayb. These are from, the knowledge of the unseen. So if they were to happen, hooray. If they were not to exist, hooray. It doesn't make a dent, at least in the creedal sense of things. But experientially, if they exist, that, keeps me up for a few nights. And even with my son, because he loves aliens, he loves these things, right? So we talk about, what it could mean. And with some of my colleagues, I even discussed, like, we can even think of, have you guys played Mass Effect? Are you guys gamers by any chance? No? Okay, right. So for maybe the younger audience, the 30 years, at least in my generation, if you're from there, right? So for those of you who ever played Mass Effect, right? This is a game where you're playing this main character. He goes to different planets and he kind of makes alliances with different species, right? And it's basically, a net sum game. You have to defeat this mega alien race because they're about to destroy everyone. Phenomenal game. If anyone wants to, I definitely, vote for it. It comes in 3 parts. And then all of that, all your decisions lead up towards this one decision point at the end. So you have different storylines. It's beautiful. My best game. It's my favorite game in the world. Anyways, coming to the point at hand, in that game, there's this conversation or this depiction of, right, intergalactic species marriage, right? So I can see how some legal jurists are going to have discussions about, can we marry these species, yeah or nay, right? And particularly if it becomes a norm, this is going to now weigh in heavily. So that was one question that, when we started speculating about these things, what could this mean on very social terms? And I think that's one area where I think people are going to want guidance on. Is this something that's possible, not possible, all kinds of things. But yeah, I'll just stop there. Matthias, you can go ahead. I've spoken too much now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shoaib and Layla as well. Thank you for mentioning this hadith where it talks about things that we humans don't know anything about. And I think this could be used as a counter-argument to people who say, well, if God created aliens, surely he would have told us about them in the Quran, right? If God tells us about jinn and bees, right? There's a chapter of the Quran named after bees and some other creatures. Surely he would have given the aliens their own chapter in the Quran. But I think there is also a general understanding among many believing Muslims that just as God is all-powerful, God also knows more than we do. And that God does not necessarily share with us everything he knows, and not at the same time. And in that sense, the Quran should not be understood necessarily as containing all of God's knowledge, right? In some ways, one could make the argument, well, the Quran contains the kind of knowledge that God wanted to reveal to one of his prophets at a certain time. And there is a very sort of popular Arabic phrase as well that goes, Wallahu alam, and God knows best, where, again, believing Muslims would acknowledge that human knowledge is limited and that God might indeed does know it better than we do, and that God has answers that we don't have. So again, this goes back to Shoaib's point about how the Quran as well as the Hadith leaves it open whether we have aliens elsewhere in the universe. God might know about them, of course, without telling us.
Yeah, very interesting. I know, Shoaib, I would be very terrified, and I've seen Signs. That's a great movie too. But I do like the idea of being able to step back and say, you know what, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is okay, and let's find out what it is. But yeah, so thank you for explaining that. I noticed we have another question on Twitter. So I think I'm starting from here. The questioner says, as according to Islamic perspective, scenes have been created for the same goals, and they will be judged as the human being will be, and the prophets sent for the human being are also sent for scenes as well. So that means they are actually living in our planet, even if we are not able to see them. This might be about the jinn. As we have been informed by the literature of a group of scenes from Nusaybin district of Mardin in Turkey, went to Medina and declared their obedience to Prophet Muhammad. Would you like to check the Twitter post as well to check?
I see the comment. Unfortunately, I don't get the I don't know what scene is here. I don't know what that's referring to. If the case is being made that it's referring to jinn, and this is being spelled out as seen, maybe that might be the case. I mean, I don't have a problem entailing that. But we also believe that jinns are metaphysical. They're not necessarily physical entities, right? And so they may be on this planet, they may be on other spaces. We don't know the full extent of their reality. Same thing goes with angels, right? We know Muslims believe it's a belief that you have two angels, one recording your good deeds, one recording your bad deeds, but we don't see them, right? So they're metaphysical in that case. But could they be on other planets? Maybe, right? So I think those things are, open for discussion. I wouldn't know how to square one opinion over the other. But I would love to, jinn. Okay, so I think this individual may be Turkish. Jinn, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think that, if jinn, I don't think you can make a case that jinn are exclusively terrestrial. I don't think you can make that case. I definitely think you can believe that some, may have paid allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ, no problem. But I definitely believe that the case is open whether they're only on this planet. I don't think that's necessarily the case. God knows best.
Certainly, if God allows us, right, to go beyond the frontiers of our own planet, right? God has allowed us as humans to set foot on the moon, right, to escape low Earth orbit, right? So there are humans living on the International Space Station, and not just humans, right? We have plants on the International Space Stations and all kinds of microbes as well that humans have brought there. We have, as humanity, we've shot dogs, for instance, into outer space, and so on. So if God allows humans and plants and animals to go beyond the confines of our planet, there is nothing that would seem to suggest that God would restrict jinn from existing only on our planet.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to follow up on a couple more questions I thought of. One was just the idea of levels of intelligence and consciousness, even on our own world. And so, for example, say we went to another planet and we find someone with the intelligence of like a cat, I almost feel like we would be more amazed that, wow, we found this being that does these things. So I guess I'm asking how we measure intelligence, and that even relates to how we measure intelligence on our own planet right now in terms of other animals. Because, animals have a certain level of, I guess, awareness is maybe a better way of saying it, or instinct. So just curious your thoughts on is there still more to discover on our own planet about living beings? And then how would we assess that intelligence elsewhere as well?
Have you guys watched the movie Prometheus?
I have not.
Oh, that is a must. That is a must-watch movie. So the premise, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I won't spoil it for you. But the premise of that movie is that a bunch of archaeologists, they find that in certain cave paintings that perhaps the origins of human beings start off with an alien civilization. And these alien civilizations are somewhere in the Andromeda. So a rich billionaire invests in it, and they go to that planet to see if they can find any markers of intellect. And similar to the cat analogy, so they find stuff there, and it gets very exciting there onwards. But if we eventually, so the question is, will we ever have interstellar travel? I think that is scientifically possible. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Second question is, would we want to go on interstellar travel? I know some people say yes, some people say I personally don't want to. I'm a very comfy homeboy. I'd like to just sit here next to my family and not go out there. If my kids want to go, they can go if they want. I'm just chilling here on planet Earth. Then if they go, right, if they want to go, what will they find and how will they react to it? If hypothetically I were on another planet and I saw life forms like cats and dogs and whatever.
Oh, I think we've lost you, so we might have to have you repeat.
Yeah. Maybe I can continue while Shoaib is sort of hopefully regaining his connection. So you mentioned sort of other intelligences on Earth. Some people connect the question of alien life with the question of, are we alone in the universe? I would say we're not alone in the universe because there's life all around us, including intelligent life. Including beings that have language, right? We know that whales have language. We know that birds have language. And we have great difficulties understanding what they say to one another. We might sort of assume that, their intelligence might be lower than us, but without us being able to understand what they're actually saying, that seems to be a difficult conclusion to make. I would say. I think Shoaib is just back here. I was just talking here about animal intelligence. Measuring intelligence is, in the history of science, something that has been very, very flawed and fraught. Right? Often intelligent tests have, let's say, in the United States, often seen sort of white male persons, so the culturally dominant people come on top in terms of intelligence, and the non-culturally dominant groups as sort of being measured as less intelligent. So obviously there's a lot of racism there connected to the history of intelligence tests as well. As humanity, we also don't have a very good record of acknowledging the intelligence of neurodiverse people. So, for instance, we have, as humanity, we have a very difficult understanding even of conditions nowadays described as like the autism spectrum disorder. Right? We know that sort of, maybe neurodiverse people, their brains might work differently from a mainstream, from what is normal, whatever that is, obviously. And we certainly have a terrible record appreciating the intelligence of neurodiverse people, even among our own species, right? So I would, put great doubt into whether we are able to truly understand or appreciate the intelligence of other species. If we sometimes have trouble appreciating the intelligence of our own fellow human beings.
Yeah, and Shoaib, we lost you right as you said cat and dogs or something like that. So just to give you an idea.
Yeah, so I was about to say that I was just transported back from the aliens. They took me for the past few seconds. So but I see that if I ever did see animals or dogs or the equivalent on other planets, I'd be very, very humbled by that. I think that would be super cool in of itself. So I can make two links here. So one is the link with general contentious issues. So in the Muslim space, evolution is still a conversation. And as you can imagine, similar to the US, where you have a lot of opinions, sometimes very volatile opinions. But the question is, if these life forms are on other planets, could they also have natural explanations? And the most go-to or most likely explanation would be evolution. So that, I think, can be another can of worms that some religious scholars may have to deal with. But coming to what Matthias said about how do you measure intelligence and all of that, right? There is a growing discussion in philosophy as well as theology known as theological anthropology, right? What is it that defines human nature, human uniqueness? And as we are probing nature more and more things are coming back at us that are testing our presumptions, right? So, for instance, if you take evolution to be true, if there were other human beings around Adam, perhaps he was not the only Homo sapien around, perhaps, right? We don't know. If that's the case, then what does that mean? What makes us unique, right? If you think about extraterrestrials, if what makes us unique is our spirituality, well, now, or our intellect, well, perhaps maybe there might be aliens that are smarter than us. If we look at AI is able to do some very interesting things that are shocking people all over the world. People are getting fired because now what I needed a person to do, I can do with a single prompt. It can pass the bar exam, it can pass medical exams. And remember, the iteration that you're seeing every day is the worst it'll ever be. One day from now, it's process 1 million iterations of algorithmic computations. So where will AI go? Are we seeing ourselves in a matrix future or in a Terminator-like reality? So theological anthropology is, I think, a growing and nascent area. And I think that the conversation about how do we measure intelligence of ourselves as well as non-humans, and how that informs us about ourselves, will be a growing space for many, many, many years to come. In fact, in my own chapter in the volume, I actually identify that I think the most contentious discussion perhaps about extraterrestrials, one of them might be the discussion about what is the most important creation of God. So this was a discussion that even theologians have had, right? Some people said it was angels. Some people said it was human beings. Some people said we don't have scriptural ways of determining one over the other. So they stay silent on this issue. Now you can imagine if we encounter these incredible alien species, that conversation is going to resurface, albeit in a new fashion, perhaps. So I think that more research needs to be done in this area, and that's why I'm excited, because as Matthias said earlier, this volume by no means is it going to be an exhaustive discussion. It is at best a start, a stimulus to the discussion, and we wanted to get as many different voices as we could into this. But we hope that it, inspires more people to look into these matters.
Yeah, and that's what go ahead.
Oh yeah. Just to follow on from that, and we really want this conversation to be as inclusive as possible, as I said earlier, including people of different identities as well as different abilities as well, right? Because if we only have people from the culturally dominant group talk about and measure intelligence, then we get a certain view of intelligence. But whereas if we involve, for instance, neurodiverse people from across the spectrum in a conversation about what counts as intelligence, what counts as normal, what counts as special, what counts as human, what counts as alien, what counts as different, then I think we if we broaden this conversation to include people with different life experiences, only then we can truly deal with a topic as big as life in the universe.
And I was going to say what I really did admire about the book, which we've mentioned a bit already, is that there's like many doors into the topic through the book. If someone is thinks more along the lines of maybe they've just heard things through popular culture, and they've never thought about how does this relate to my faith, especially Islam. That popular culture is a doorway into reading all of it, and then vice versa. A theologian might learn something new just about how, out there in the rest of the world, how people are filtering this information. So I really thought it was great, and I'd love for there to be a volume 2. Although Shoaib just reminded me, regarding artificial intelligence, I think that in itself needs like its own volume, because I'm noticing so many different conversations coming up about that too, and it is I can't remember who said it, but it is like an alien life form, emerging in our midst, so to speak, because folks either have heard more about it than they've used it, so there's a lot of maybe misinformation too. So yeah, just I'm looking for more books to read, so I'm depending on you guys. So.
I can definitely guarantee, Leila, that we will have something coming up. We actually, shortly after this conference, we had a conference on pre and post Darwinian perspectives on theological anthropology. So as far as I can tell, the academic literature on theological anthropology from the Islamic side is still very, very underdeveloped. So we're trying to kick that off, and I can very proudly say that so the series that I'm the chief editor of for Palgrave, Islam and Science, we actually contracted Nazif Muhtaroglu, he's a Turkish philosopher, to what I believe will be the first academic treatment of AI and Islamic theology. So he's writing from a particular tradition known as Maturidi theology. And he argues in there that philosophically speaking, it is very unlikely that AI can gain consciousness. Now, whether that's true or not, and whether his arguments have merit, will be an open conversation. But that I think will be a stimulus to the dialogue. So we do have stuff coming out in this area. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that in itself might also stimulate further conversations about extraterrestrial intelligence too. Because it is likely that perhaps maybe that advanced aliens would have developed their own forms of artificial intelligence. It is possible that we discover techno signatures in outer space before we detect biosignatures. It is possible that we will come across an alien robotic spacecraft before we come across a crewed alien spaceship, a spaceship with a crew. Just like if you think about most of the spacecraft that we've sent out into the edges of our solar system, like have been robotic spacecraft. So yeah, we might as well encounter extraterrestrial intelligence as a form of machine intelligence.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. So I'll just have one more question, but just to close this off, current events right now are very interesting. We have had leaders in the United States, just even recently, Colonel Carl Nell came out and just basically said he has no doubt that non-human intelligence exists and is here. Not too many people are talking about that. I've noticed there's a lot of talk online maybe, but not in the everyday world. But I'm just curious how that has impacted you, or where your believability of it is, what your ratio of believability to not in terms of some of the conversations happening in the United States about non-human intelligence.
Sorry, I missed the part of the question because my VPN disconnected. Can you just over that again?
Recently, Colonel Carl Nell was at the SALT conference, and he directly stated that non-human intelligence is here. Non-human intelligence has interacted with humans, and that it has always been here. And then a follow-up question was asked, and he said he had no doubt that non-human intelligence exists and is here. So I'm just still, I get conversations from folks of different levels of acceptance of that statement. So I'm just wondering where you all fall on that spectrum.
Thank you. I think for me personally, Shoaib, do you want to start?
No, you go ahead.
For me personally, it gives me hope, because with all the conflicts that we see with all the tragedies on our planet, with how we have been dealing with climate change or not dealt with climate change, how with all the genocides as well that we've witnessed in the 20th as well as 21st centuries. Like I feel that sort of, in some ways, human intelligence is quite limited. That it seems, right, we are so flawed as human beings, and we've done as human beings so many terrible things to one another. So for me, it gives me hope, hopefully, that maybe there is an intelligence out there in the future, at least, that is better than us, that is more advanced than us. I hope that there's something for us to aspire to, right? Just like I hope that our own children will be smarter than us one day, right? That in the future humans will be smart and will be just being better than we are. I also hope that maybe in the future we can go out there and find and create maybe something like, I don't know, Star Trek's United Federation of Planets, where we are better than our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm a bit more on the neutral side of things. I have gone through a lot of material. I think my biggest interest in this space is Area 51. And I think the whole, controversies, discussions, cover-ups around that do give me more of a kick to believe that perhaps they are there, that, perhaps aliens do exist. I'm more inclined to believe that. But on the flip side, and this is where I think, your theology can, steer you in many different directions. I've heard from some theologians that this is a massive deception at play because it's in the preparation of the Antichrist, right? So I've heard those discussions as well. So for and even though I love conspiracy theories, I can really munch on them. There's one particular channel which I think is very informative. It's a very fun, entertaining, and yet cleanly presented channel, which is the Y-Files. I don't know if you guys know about the Y-Files.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. that guy should get a medal for how he presents conspiracy theories. Kudos to him. He's phenomenal. I wish I can, I have the opportunity to meet him at some point. He's really good. He's just phenomenal. And I think he does a good job in terms of giving you what has been said and how it's been debated, leaving you with the decision to make whether you believe in this stuff or not. I think he's giving more plausibility, or rather academic plausibility to some of these things, without kind of making it a big hoo-ha, without sensationalism. But I think that I still remain neutral in this space. I'm open to them existing. I'm open to not existing. And I think there are many different variables pulling me on each side. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, and those are both great points to consider. And just acknowledging we've heard statements to the affirmative, but we have not yet seen evidence. So, or at least, not all of us have seen evidence.
I would say, Leila, I would say one thing, right? The NASCAR lines are a mystery, right? How can you create those kinds of things without having some kind of aerial technology? Right. That is, So, it's shocking, that one. That really is, it stumps.
Yeah, but I agree with you with the Y-Files too. And Matthias, I agree with you too. It does give some hope to maybe look ahead to just something that unites us all too, that we are all focused on instead of everything else. I noticed we had one other statement on Twitter. I don't want to overlook that. It was about artificial intelligence. And it says, unfortunately, I think considering AI within the domain of extraterrestrial is a bit too much of a stretch, since that is man-made, which would just mean that man becomes the creator of extraterrestrials. Oh, very interesting.
I think, just to clarify, I think he may have misunderstood Matthias's point, where if we get this advancement in AI and we do have this contact with extraterrestrials, perhaps there may lead to some symbiotic relationship down the line, right? So things like man-machine kind of realities. And I don't think that Matthias, am I correct in saying I don't think that you implied that AI could become extraterrestrial, right? I don't think that's what you were saying.
Well, it could be that aliens become AI in the sense of just like an alien civilization might first come across a robotic spacecraft from Earth before they become across a crewed or a manned spacecraft from Earth. Similarly, it is possible that we first come across alien machines before we come across the biological aliens who may have built the machines, right? So we may first encounter with an alien intelligence might be with the alien computer before we shake hands with the biological organism.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful, fascinating discussion. I hope you will be back with your next book, or even before that. I wanted to mention to everyone watching now or in the future, I'm sorry about the chat. And if you did have a question, go ahead and post it in our comments because we will follow up, and I'll follow up and make sure your question gets answered. So, but yeah, that's all for now. And thank you all. And please go and find this wonderful book. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah. Oh, I think it's Mars. Oh, there we are. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm afraid I don't have my copy. My copies are in the UK right now, so I don't have my copy.
That's fine. That's fine. All right. Well, thank you both, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Leila. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, and Eid Mubarak to all Muslims as well. That's coming up next week, and كل عام وأنتم بخير.
كل عام وأنتم بخير. عيد مبارك.